question that frames the entire discussion of the Crito: what obligation do we owe the state? Must I obey the law, or am I allowed to contradict the law and break out of jail? We begin with a couple assumptions. Assumptions regarding ethics, assumptions regarding morality, the doing of right and the doing of wrong. And this statement from page 7 should seem fairly familiar to you. Socrates is not advancing a moral principle that is all that shockingly new. In fact, this one probably frames most of our ethical systems, or at least can be found within them. Then we ought not to retaliate or render evil for evil to anyone, whatever evil we may have suffered from him. So, somebody does evil to you, and according to Socrates' notion of morality or ethics, you are not allowed to do evil in return. If somebody does evil to you, somebody stole Chloe's lunch, making Chloe very sad. Chloe finds out who stole her lunch. Somebody stole Chloe's lunch. She knows who did it. Who's guilty? Who has done wrong? The person who stole the lunch. How might Chloe react if she were a less moral and mature person than she actually is? Olivia? Steal that person's lunch back. That's right. Now who's guilty? Both of them have done wrong. Socrates says you've got to focus on your own action. Don't focus on the actions of others. You can't control them. Chloe can't control that person who stole her lunch. She can only control her own actions, and she must pay attention to her own. And to say, I am allowed to do right because of this circumstance, is unnecessarily irrational and subjective, just as we saw the opinions of those foolish men. Chloe cannot retaliate. She cannot do something wrong. She must act rightly. What does that mean? Second assumption. Right is absolute. It's not relative. If something is right for you, it's right for somebody else also. If an action is wrong, the person next to you shouldn't do it, you shouldn't do it, nobody should do it. If an action is right, you should follow it, and other people should follow it also. The rules don't change just because they apply to you. However, often we do change them. Often we act subjectively. Often we apply rules to ourselves differently from how we apply them to others. Can you give me an example of a rule, a moral rule, something you consider to be right or wrong, that you agree with, you apply to other people, but you've broken yourself and rationalized it? Brian?
Don't lie.
Don't lie. Excellent. So we agree that lying is wrong, correct? As a general principle, lying seems to be wrong. Can you think of a selfish, sort of subjective time when somebody might lie and excuse that action?
Lie to protect someone, such as, like, what if your family went into witness protection, someone shoved a gun to your head and asked your family.
Brian, the lying, yes, you're right. The witness protection program involves lying. This one's a little bit tricky because this might be lying for a noble purpose we might not want to mess with for now. We'll mess with that in a little bit. But let's start with something that's a little bit more selfish, a little bit more obviously wrong and subjective. Tori, you had your hand up. Why might somebody lie and excuse it, rationalize it?
I was going to say that protects someone else.
Okay, but think about protecting somebody else when you shouldn't be protecting them. Can you think of an instance in high school, perhaps, when you might lie to protect somebody else and you... Okay, if you don't want to hurt their feelings, that also seems a little bit noble. Jordan?
It's not like what you said, but lying to like get out of trouble.
Excellent. Lying to get out of trouble. Perfect example. Okay, we will have to address the noble examples, but let's address the vicious example first. I'm sure, show of hands, how many people here have never lied? You just did. We have all lied. Not only have we all lied, but chances are pretty good that all of us at one time have lied and then rationalized it as perfectly morally acceptable to lie. And sometimes we've done that by saying, well, yes, I lied to get myself out of trouble. That doesn't bear very close examination. And the more we think about it logically, the more we're dispassionate and objective, we realize that, wow, we're really wrong. But still, at the moment, we lie, we do it, we commit that wrong act because we want to get ourselves out of trouble. We don't want to feel the pain. We commit a wrong act because we don't want to feel pain. We do something that we rationally know is wrong because we don't like the way it feels to do that action. Socrates has said that doing right means doing right, obeying truth. It doesn't mean doing what you feel. It doesn't mean obeying your own personal subjective interests. It's not relative. It is not relative to your feelings. It's not relative to your desires. It is simply right or it is wrong. And if it is right, you follow it. And if it is wrong, you don't do it. He proceeds from that characterization of ethics. And that characterization of ethics, by the way, that is enormously powerful in Western ethical theory. The idea that right supersedes you, your individuality, and your personal subjective interests. That somehow you must submit to what is right and what is wrong. Abby?
But what if what you're feeling is right?
You might feel the correct. So, but what you should do is you shouldn't put feeling into the equation one way or another, right? In fact, a later philosopher, Immanuel Kant, said, if you are acting based upon your personal feelings, chances are pretty good that you're acting immorally. Not definite that you're acting immorally, but pretty good. If you're acting based upon your rational knowledge of right and wrong, then you're probably acting morally. But a good way to determine if you're acting morally, according to this philosopher, Kant, is if you're acting in a way you don't want to act. Like when you tell the truth and you know you'll get in trouble. You don't want to do that, right? You don't want to tell the truth because you know you get busted, but you do it anyway. Why do you do it? Because it's right, right? So Kant, this other philosopher, who is pretty much descendant of Plato and Socrates, will say, don't take feelings into it one way or another. Do it because it's right, not because you want to or you don't want to. Take the feelings and put them aside.
So, in the quote at the end of the page, it's kind of like talks about like revenge. Like,
Right. Why would you engage in revenge, Olivia?
as someone who doesn't
Because you are emotionally overwrought.
Oh.
Because you feel grief and anger. You are proceeding from emotions, you are not proceeding from reason. You are not dealing rationally. Most people who are engaging in revenge, like Chloe stealing the lunch, most people who are engaging in revenge are doing so because they are inflamed by emotion, not because they are proceeding from a rationally considered course of action. Okay? Revenge is emotional. Revenge is not rational. It answers emotions, not reason. So Socrates says, let's take these assumptions. That we must always act right, and right binds for all people the same way. I must divorce myself emotionally. Because what is Crito trying to do? Trying to make him emotionally invested. How? David, what has he done to try and make Socrates emotionally invested?
Reminding him about his kids.
Reminding him about his children. Notice that Plato doesn't write this in there unintentionally just because he's hoping to fill space. He writes that in there because he wants to show Crito trying to get Socrates to be subjective. Socrates resists and says, no, no, no. I'm not going to be subjective. I will be rational. Let's engage in an inquiry. Here we go with the inquiry. Premise number